I didn't run, so January 23 is when I retired. Okay, Prop 2 is a proposal that was on the ballot in 2022. It was passed in Michigan, and it made some big changes in election procedures and election law, but it also enshrined some laws that were already in place into the Constitution, which is quite a big shift. These are some of the topics that we're going to cover, and why don't we just go to the next one. Everybody in the state of Michigan has a fundamental right to vote. That means you have the right to get your ballot, to vote it in secret, and to not be harassed or intimidated in any way. If you feel that you have been, your right has been infringed upon in any way, you are allowed, in any of these ways or any other way, you are allowed to bring a lawsuit.
Trying to get the right rhythm here.
That's okay. Okay, so when an election happens, people vote, the votes are recorded, and they go to what we call a board of canvassers. This happens at the county level, and also the state board of canvassers, and their job is to certify the election. So what they do, they look at all the procedures that took place, and if all the procedures were followed, if all the rules were followed, if everything meets the criteria of election law, their job is to certify that election. It is not discretionary. They can't say, well, yeah, you followed all the procedures, but I still don't think so-and-so won. We had a big issue we all are aware of with what they call fake electors, signing certificates that they should not have signed because they were not the official electors. So the canvassers do not have discretionary power.
Could I just mention something real quick? I sat on the board of canvassers for 40 years, and it was, without a doubt, it was a huge learning experience, but I will tell you, those election results are gone over with a fine-tooth comb. We would spend sometimes 2 full days going over everything. And we need to be very proud of Manistee County and how our board of canvassers are appointed and how our clerk, whoever is the clerk at the time, has worked to make sure that our elections are not fraught with anything illegal.
Did you feel proud of Michigan's election system after really getting an in-depth look at that?
It was a huge learning curve for me, and
absolutely.
I really enjoyed my time on the board of canvassers.
Yeah, that's a big job to go over that.
Well, and I worked as a voting.
Oh, here for election inspector?
Yes, several years, and the training is fantastic, but they have everything covered.
That's where you get an inside look at how elections work, why they're secure, why it's really hard to commit election fraud.
Everything, once it leaves here, is on a machine, and it's locked up. The paper ballots are locked up.
Right.
I mean, it's secure from A to Z.
From start to finish.
Right. A lot of security in place. But let's go back to that one. Okay, early voting. No.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. This is probably, in my mind, the biggest change in Michigan elections that as a result of Prop 2. And we've never had this in Michigan. Other states, I believe, have had it, but this is something new. So, in any state or federal election, the jurisdiction will be required to have an arrangement so that voters can vote in person 9 days before the election. The last day will be Sunday. Let's say the election's on Tuesday. Sunday, you go back 9 days, so that includes 2 weekends. They will have to set up voting machines and polling places where you can go and cast your vote in person. This is not absentee voting.
We've done that.
The 9 days, and it will have to be at least 8 hours each day. It could be 4 hours, take a break for lunch, come back for 4 hours. It could start at 7, it could start at 8. There's some discretion there for when those hours will happen. There also is going to be probably an hour of setup and an hour of close down, so something like 9 to 10 hours People will be there. I imagine it's always been you have to have 3 people to run an election. I don't know if that's going to be the same. I would imagine it is. And probably, you know, equal number of Republicans and Democrats are as equal as you can get it. Communities can offer early voting in a special election that's not a state or federal if they choose to.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Now that one of the Kennedys has entered the race as an independent, is that going to change any of that, you think? You have to have an independent, a Republican, and a Democrat?
If you, no, you mean to balance your poll workers? No, because they've always had the Green Party and the Libertarian parties. It's the 2 major parties that have to be equally represented on your election inspectors. There will be these things called early voting sites. There you see the EVS. Those will be determined by the jurisdiction. In our county, there has been some preliminary, do you all know, maybe you heard some things about that? Most likely the city of Manistee will be an EVS, a site, so everybody in the city can go there for those 9 days. There'll be another site that will probably be Arcadia Township, Onekama Township, Manistee Township, and maybe Pleasanton or Bear Lake, and that'll be possibly in Onekama. I don't know that that's been finalized. And then there'll be another site, a 3rd site, for all the rest of like the 9 remaining townships. It goes all the way from Norman up through Dixon and Brown and Maple Grove up into Marilla, Cleon, Springdale. All those will be probably at the Calva Community Center. That's one early voting site, but you will still vote your own township. You know, there'll be 9 precincts essentially. The county will get together and agree on this and work out the details. Okay, another big change in Proposal 2, which is now enshrined in the Michigan Constitution, is called the Permanent Mail Ballot List. A mail ballot means AV, absent voter ballot. They're calling them mail ballots. Okay, didn't I sign up to get a ballot for every election? This was probably the biggest confusion in voters that I would ever experience. And no, you didn't. What you signed up for, okay, you probably have seen these. These are applications saying, I want to vote by mail. I want an absent ballot voted. An absent ballot sent to me in the mail. Okay, fill this out. I might mail it to you. You might pick it up. You can get these anywhere. Fill this out, put your name, address, sign it with your signature, and fill out this little application to vote down here. And then the clerk will check all your information, verify that you're eligible, and then when she gets her ballots, and I'm going to say she for clerk because I have never known a clerk, at least in this county, who was not a woman, so I'm just going to say she. Then she'll mail your ballot when she receives the ballots. If you, when you come in to vote in person, you fill out a little application like that. That's your application to vote in person. You can see that, here it is right here. Only you're applying to vote by mail, okay? Now, there used to be a system called a permanent AV list, and you could sign up to get an application sent to you for each election. You didn't have to call up and say, I want to vote AV, will you send me an application? Not all clerks had a permanent AV list. Some did. It was not required by law. Now you can sign up to get a ballot to always vote absent ballot. You say, I don't want to go into the polls anymore. I live too far away. You don't have to have a reason. In 2018, it became no reason. You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to have a handicap, nothing. You just always want to get your ballot by mail. So you sign an application that'll say, I would like to be on the permanent mail ballot list. Your clerk is not going to send you an application each time. You're going to get the ballot automatically. That is a huge change.
Pam, is that the only way we'll be able to do, what if I decide I want to vote absentee this time, but I want to vote in person the next time? You don't have to go on the permanent list, do you?
You know, I'm not sure how that works. If you sign up for this permanent mail vote list, and then you want to come and vote in person, you still may come in and vote in person.
Just bring your ballot with you.
But if you don't want them to mail you the ballots anymore, I believe you're going to have to fill something out in writing that says, take me off this list, don't send me a ballot automatically anymore.
But if I don't go on the list,
right,
and I just say one time I want to vote absentee, I can still use the old method?
I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. That's a good question.
Okay.
If you just fill it out and you're not on a permanent list, I don't know if they'll have applications for single elections. I don't know the answer. That's a good question.
I would say that they probably have the old way and this new way, so that one is different from the other. But if you want to vote early one time, you do it the old way.
Okay, so now we have to be careful when we say vote early, because early voting is in-person voting.
Okay,
Just
so
like on election day, you will go to this place, let's say you'll go to Maple Grove, you will get a ballot, you'll fill out the ovals, and you'll put it through the tabulator.
So the other would be called mail.
Right, the mail voting, and that is early voting. We've always had that.
So you would want to distinguish between the two.
Right.
And that would be the main thing.
Right, right. There's a crossover. We've always had early voting because you get your absent ballot early. You know, you can get it sometimes a month early, depending on when the ballots are delivered to the clerk and depending when you apply and so forth. You fill it out at home. This early voting, the new thing means that you go to a polling location, they issue you a ballot, which may be printed on the spot. I've heard that. They're not going to have stacks of ballots for 9 different townships. You'll get a ballot, you'll fill it out, you'll put it through the tabulator. The tabulator will be locked at the end of the night, and it will not be unsealed until election night. They will not count those votes. Just like when you vote absent ballot, they don't open them as they come back. They wait until election day to unseal them and tabulate them. So they will not count those 9 days.
You don't think that they'll change that now that we're going to have the early?
Change what?
Where they'll start tabulating early?
They will not tabulate early. They will not, because, you know, let's say a lot of people start going into this early voting and they come up, they say, oh, so-and-so's ahead. No.
That's what happens in Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, they do tabulate early.
Okay.
And then it becomes a big thing, you know.
Like almost a campaign.
Yes.
Now, I understand that they will not tabulate the final. They'll close down the polls and close down the machine. It'll be sort of like on pause. But the final tabulation won't happen until election day, just like in the other in-person precincts. Okay, so there's a box you can now check on your application, and it says additional ways, possibly online, because you can apply for an AV online. I imagine that's what that means. Okay, if you move, will you still stay on the list? Yes, but update your address so that your ballot is sent to you at the correct address. Now, if you move outside of Michigan, you know, you vote, you have to be a resident of Michigan. And that's all tied into the Secretary of State, which issues driver's license as well as runs elections. So all the registration process to vote and voter ID, either your state ID, your driver's license, it's all the Secretary of State, okay? So if you move outside of Michigan, let's say you move to Florida and you get a driver's license in Florida, Florida notifies Michigan, hey, this person has applied, they now live in Florida, your voter registration will be canceled, you'll no longer get the ballots, because you can only vote where you live. Okay, what if you're not going to be home? You're going to be in Arizona or you're going to be on vacation. You can notify your clerk and, you know, request that your ballot be sent to a different address. If you sign up for that and then you don't go the next year, make sure you contact her and say, you know, I want it at my home address. But this is all, there's software. that does all this address business. Okay, so you'll stay on this list to always get your ballot in the mail unless you sign a request, I don't want to do this anymore, you move outside of Michigan, if you don't update your registration address. That number 4 would be, for example, if you were convicted of a crime and were in jail, they would not send you a ballot. And if you don't vote for 6 years in a row, then they will stop sending you the ballots. I imagine there'll be a notification system. Okay, is this list secure? And yes, because it goes with the signature verification. You had to sign your application whether you came in person to vote in a precinct. You had to sign your application when you applied, and if you're applying for this permanent mail list, you also have to sign. And those are the signatures that are captured digitally by the Secretary of State. And the clerks have access to that in their software. And they do check. They do check the signatures, not only on applications, but also if you, this is, I think, the latest style of AV return envelope, you have to sign your envelope. That has to match your application. That has to match the digital signature. Okay, do you have to have an ID, a photo ID, in order to vote? The answer is no. Most people do. And when you come in to vote, the person at the computer will say, oh, you know, hi, Mrs. Smith, I see you're a registered voter in our township. Do you have your ID today? If you don't, maybe you changed purses and you don't have it, or maybe it's, you know, you lost it, or what, maybe you don't have one. You just say, I don't have it with me. Yes, you can still vote. What you do is sign, and this has been the law since, I'm going to say the 90s. These used to be blank. And now they have this little affidavit on the back that says, I attest that I am not in possession of my state-issued ID, my driver's license, so forth. And everything I said on the front is true. I want to vote. Good. If you were to say, I'd say, oh, hi, you know, I see you're on our voter list. May I see your ID? And you say, well, yeah, it's in my pocket, but I don't want to show it to you. I would have to say, as the poll worker, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot issue you a ballot. If you refuse, if you do have it and you refuse to show it. So, but if you just don't have it, you know, you sign the affidavit. And there's a lot of controversy about why do we have to have IDs, you know, how can you let somebody vote who doesn't have an ID? Well, in some areas, maybe people can't afford to get an ID, they can't pay the fee, or they don't have transportation to get somewhere to get one, or they're disabled, or whatever. Those people are still eligible to vote. Yeah. You know, if they register to vote, they prove they're a Michigan resident and they meet the qualifications, this just allows them to have the same access to voting that everyone else has. Okay, what kind of photo ID can you have? Anything basically that's an official ID with your picture. It can be an expired driver's license. You just didn't renew it, but it has your picture and your signature. That's good. It can be from another state even. A military ID, a tribal ID, a passport, and so forth. Okay, what's happened with absent ballots? Well, you used to get this, and then your ballot would be inside there in another envelope, and you had to put postage, which often was more than a first-class stamp. Sometimes they'd let them go for first class. It's kind of variable. Now the state has to pay, so these are going to be postage paid. If there's a problem with when you vote by mail, the most common problem was people forgot to sign. And I do not know of any clerks who would not try to fix that. Now it's in the Constitution. They have to notify you and take steps to correct that. Usually it would be a phone call, hi, I got your ballot back, you forgot to sign it. You know, can you stop in the office? Or, you know, oh, I'm going past your house, I'll bring it and you can sign it, or whatever. But they would take steps to make sure that your vote counted. That's the job of the clerk, is to make it accessible and convenient and as easy as possible for everyone to vote. You can also, okay, can you
Correct.
track your absentee ballot. Yes, you can. You could before, Michigan.gov, you could track it. Now it's all updated to be more efficient. And if some municipalities were not, I think the clerks had to enter, I received an application on such and such a date. This is in the computer. I sent a ballot on such and such a date. The ballot number was this. I received this absent ballot back and it was signed. So those 3 pieces of information were entered into a computer, and I think a lot of clerks also did it on paper, just to have a paper record. And these are things that the Board of Canvassers can check, or in an audit, I should say, in an audit can be checked. Okay, so what has changed? The status of your submitted application, if there's any issues, we never could do that. We couldn't say, oh, so-and-so forgot to sign their ballot. That was not in the tracking system. Now apparently it will be. How you can fix any issues. And the state is going to somehow make it possible for you to get a text or an email about the status of your ballot. That's in the works. When can you use the system? They're saying later this year. But this mi.gov, you can go there and look yourself up and see, are you registered? You know, did the clerk get your application? Did the clerk send you a ballot yet? Did she receive your ballot? And all kinds of stuff. Drop boxes have been around since 2020 at least. Now they're required. And they have to be secure. You can't be able to reach in, for example, and take ballots out. They have to be a certain style. This one looks like it locks right down here. They have to be secured, like bolted to a porch or chained or something, so someone couldn't come with a truck and take it. And I think if there's a slot on the side of a town hall, for example, you know, where you can put stuff and it goes into a lock container, I think that also counts. There's requirements for how many are required, you know, in municipalities. So now there can't be a law. Well, we're going to take out, you know, all the drop boxes. That happened in Texas. You might have heard about it. We're going to take these drop boxes and only have one in this great big county. Well, that really made it hard for people in rural areas, maybe who didn't have cars, couldn't get to a post office or whatever, to return their absent ballots. Now you can drop it in a drop box. You can still bring it in person, or you actually can bring it into the precinct as well. That mi.gov, if you don't know where yours is, it's got them all listed. The clerks have to put the locations. You can only use your drop box that's, you know, if you took your ballot from Arcadia and put it in Onekama, she would get it back here. I know Manistee Township and Manistee City frequently, hey Diane, I got one of your voters, you know, I'll bring it over, I'll drop it off. I mean, but you shouldn't just go randomly drop these. And it should be there 40 days prior, and they're open all the time. They don't have hours, they're, you know, 24/7. And they are there on election day, and they will check them at 8 p.m. Make sure somebody didn't come and slip a. And clerks also.
We had them come in late.
Yeah, and clerks also would go home and check their own mail if my home address was the township address, because we didn't have a drop, you know, mail receptacle. So I always check my mail. And one time, someone who worked at the post office actually came to our hall and said, you know, somebody put this in the mail, and I didn't want to put it in your mailbox. Here it is. I mean, that's the Postal Service above and beyond. Yeah, that's great. Video surveillance is not required, but I think in about 3 years that's going to become a requirement that you have to have video surveillance. So it's always been a flat-out rule that your absent ballot had to be in the clerk's hands by 8 p.m. on election day. If you walked into your township office at 8:15 and said, "Oh, I'm dropping off my mom's absent voter ballot," the clerk would have to say, "I'm sorry, the poll's closed at 8. I cannot accept it." Or if it came, like say it came in my mailbox or a mailbox the next day, sorry, it's 8 p.m. Now there is an exception to that, and that's for people who are in the military or who live overseas. If you move, let's say you move to England or Australia or wherever, and you still want to vote, you keep your registered address in Michigan. You can have your ballot transmitted to you electronically. You print it, you fill it out, you send it back. There's going to be a 6-day grace period. As long as it's postmarked by Election Day, it will still be counted. Okay, audits. What are those? Those are checks when the state or the county can review all the documents, the actual ballots, the physical ballots themselves, all the procedures, the testing of the machines. All this stuff is documented, locked and tagged and secured, and you can determine if there was an error or fraud. And most of the time, what election audits, at least the ones that I've studied, what they show is human error. Somebody mismarked something. Somebody wrote a wrong number. Somebody miscounted. Not finding. I mean, there is election fraud. It would be possible to detect it, but usually audits detect human error. And an audit will just make certain that the correct person was certified in that election. That's different than a recount. An audit is when you review the procedures. A recount is actually recounting the ballots. Okay, state, Michigan Secretary of State ordered the county and conduct an audit. Partisan, it's not a political party doing it, and we're now, by law, cannot be a partisan entity that's doing audit. Are you secure? Yes. Because after an election, as Janice knows from the canvasser, and anyone who's been an inspector, the ballots, the test ballots, the tapes, the handwritten reports, the computer reports, the list of voters, everything is secured in these are kind of like zipper canvas bags or other containers that are certified by the Board of Canvassers for a certain period of time. There's a tag put on it with a seal, and inside that tag is the date, and people sign it. Someone from each two opposing parties initials it. This is not one person sitting in an office collecting everything up, and putting it in a garbage bag. I mean, there's procedures for it. So when it says election materials, ballots, statements of votes, those kinds of things, there's procedures for how that stuff is secured. When an audit happens, these things are brought, I don't know, someone comes to you or you bring it there, and then these seals are cut and checked and double checked. It also has to be open to the public and held in a public location. Okay, this funding, that's the next slide, I believe. I'm not familiar with this on a personal level because most of the polling places are owned by the municipalities. It's a township hall. The township owns the hall, that's where you vote, there's no money exchange. The money to pay election inspectors comes out of the township's budget. Some things are paid for by the state, like the printing of the ballots or these materials. Sometimes it's the township, sometimes it's the state. Putting notices in newspapers, there's certain criteria for who pays for all that stuff. I've never been offered, anybody said, well, here's a bag of money so you can help run your elections. It might be that someone might donate the use of a space, like maybe
like a church,
a church maybe.
Community center, because they don't have
something like that, and they wouldn't charge you for it? Okay, that could be I mean, I've had people brought us donuts.
Yeah.
So anyways, now any charitable contributions have to be publicly disclosed. And the only exception on that is clerks. It says, does the they have to accept a no, and there's, if they do accept it, you have to disclose it, and then I think the next one says, can you take any contributions? No, you can't take it if it's from a foreign source. Okay, League of Women Voters. There's their website, lwv.nancycounty.org. Thank you. Any comments? Anybody?